It's 7 o'clock. You're watching Greece Wildfires, Holidays Under Threat on Sky News. Over the next 60 minutes, we'll unpack what's happening on the ground in Greece as the fires cause chaos for thousands of tourists. As the government insists holidaymakers should still be free to decide whether to visit Greece, we'll hear from one family forced to sleep rough after fleeing the fires. Rescue flights are already bringing people back to the UK, with more scheduled over the coming days. We'll hear from one tourist who escaped. There are safety fears too on the island of Corfu as the Coast Guard helps with evacuations and firefighters battle to control blazes there. And with more tourists still hoping to visit Greece, we'll be speaking to experts about what to do if your holiday is impacted and what your rights are. Good evening. Holidaymakers in Greece have described facing chaos and confusion as thousands of tourists have been forced to flee out-of-control wildfires and board rescue flights home. As many as 10,000 British tourists are estimated to be on the popular island of Rhodes, where homes and hotels have been burnt down, forcing many to find shelter in evacuation centres or face sleeping rough. Well, for the next hour, we'll be hearing some of their stories in this special programme, Greece Wildfires, Holidays Under Threat. We'll be asking what to do if your plans are affected and what rights you have, as well as hear from those trying to leave Rhodes. First, let's take a look at the situation on the ground, and let's speak to Claire Alexander, who's on holiday in Rhodes. Claire, hello to you. Thank you so much for talking to us. So you're on Rhodes at the moment. How long have you been there?
So we arrived early hours Friday.
Okay, so how did it start? How did you become aware that there was this fire raging, and what happened?
So on Saturday, we could see the black smoke coming from the next village. Everybody was in chaos. Everybody was upset. We didn't know what to do. The hotel
Claire,
kept saying, stay here.
Claire, I'm going to jump in. Yeah. Set the scene for us. Where were you when you saw that smoke coming? Are you staying in a hotel?
We were staying at the Stella apartment hotel in Pefkos.
Okay, and where were you when you first saw those flames?
We were at the hotel.
By the pool? Where were you exactly?
Started at the pool in the afternoon, and then we were sitting on the balcony and just watched it as it took over. We could see the flames coming from the mountains closer and closer.
That must have been absolutely terrifying. Who are you with there? Your family, I assume?
Yes, I'm with my husband and my 4 children.
And what was that like, Claire, when you're sitting there by the pool, seeing those... Had you heard that there was a fire? Because it's been going for a week, so had you heard?
No, I heard nothing. A few people had said to me before we went to travel, have you heard about the fires? And everyone said it's nowhere near you. It's more in the south. Couldn't be more wrong. Within 24 hours, the talk was saying the fires are on the way because the wind was blowing our way. And yeah, 48 hours, that was it. We could see the flames and we had to be evacuated.
Okay, so how did that... Go ahead, Claire.
It's the most terrifying ordeal that any of us have ever been through. Every time I talk about it, think of it, like even now my clothes smell of ash and dirt, and it's going to cause a lot of trauma, I think, for a long time.
No, I can understand that it must be extremely traumatic. So if you don't want to talk about it at any point, you just let me know. But let's go back to that moment when you're sitting by the pool with your kids and your husband and you see that smoke. What happened then?
So I went to try and find a Jet2 rep. Nobody in sight. Everybody around was trying to ring Jet2, saying, are you going to move us? What's happening? And then more and more, it started off with white smoke, and the hotel was saying, don't worry, they're putting it out. Then the black smoke came. Then we saw the flames. And in the end, all our phones went off with a government alert. And then that's when we had to get out of there.
Okay, and so how close were they, those flames, when you did see the flames? How close? Can you give us some sort of an idea?
I believe they were about 2 kilometres away.
And what did your kids do? They must have been absolutely terrified.
Well, we had to lie to my 4-year-old and say that we're leaving because the toilet is broken because we have no water and electricity. But obviously, once you can see the fire, everybody was absolutely petrified, wanting answers from me that I couldn't give them. Mum, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? Are we going to die? Are we going to die in the fire? It was awful. I just had to put a happy face on and pretend we're on some big adventure.
So what did you do? You decided at that point when you got that text or the message from the authorities that you're going to leave. At that point, what do you do?
We ran down to the hotel. Everybody, all the other holiday makers were screaming, running. We were told just to get our passports and to wait for a coach down the street. So we packed up, waited down the street. The hotel manager, Stella, phenomenal, couldn't fault her. She was trying to get us buses out of there. 3 hours we were sat in 35-degree heat with nothing, waiting for buses, and no one was coming for us.
Were you able to get all of your stuff out of the room, or did you just grab what you could and run?
No, so when we established that it was going to be quite a wait of sitting on the street, they'd said to us that we needed to start walking to the beach for safety. So my husband said, I was going to get all of our stuff while we're waiting. And in 10 minutes flat, he packed up 2 rooms and we had all of our stuff.
Okay. And so then what did you do? You spent 3 hours waiting for the buses. Did they eventually come, or did you walk to the beach?
Yeah. No, they eventually came and we were put on a bus. The gentleman didn't speak English, didn't tell us where we were going, what we were doing. We were all frantic. Everybody was crying. Where are we going to go? 3 hours later, we arrive in Faliraki. We arrive at a church. There was no room for us there, where they had set up a refuge centre. Went to a basketball gym. No, turned us away. We can't take you in. Tried local schools. Nobody could take us. And then the final place took us, even though they were kind of oversubscribed. And we ended up in a school.
And when you were going around to all of those places, were you walking to them, or was the coach taking you to each of them?
No, the coach did take us.
And so then how many hours? I would say that's 6 hours by the time you got to the second city. Had you heard from your tour
Correct.
company?
Absolutely nothing. Jet2, nobody would answer. Our rep that said that they were going to be there, no answer, nothing. We didn't know what was going on. Jet2 didn't even know that we'd been taken.
And so what did you do then?
So we went into the school, and it was honestly, I felt like I was in some kind of horror movie. There was no mattresses left. The local villagers had brought in mattresses and bedding, but there was nothing left for us. So we all had to go into classrooms, and they said, go to sleep. Myself and my husband couldn't sleep, but my children slept on the classroom floor. Air conditioning didn't work in that room we were in. And then it was a case of going down, asking people, has anybody heard anything? And not one single people out of hundreds had heard anything from Jet2. So we had to just sit there.
And so, Claire, where are you now?
So luckily, my parents have paid for us to come to a hotel in the north. We're about 5 kilometres from the airport. So we've come here where it's safe, hopefully. And then we know that if the worst comes to the worst, we're really worried about getting home. So we're only about a 10-minute drive from the airport here. So we're still waiting to hear, are we going to get sent home? Are they going to come and save us? Do we stay here? Will we get home on time? Who knows? Okay,
Claire, just to let you know, Jet2 have announced that it will operate 4 repatriation flights from Rhodes to bring holidaymakers back to the UK tonight. Claire, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We do hope that you get home safely. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's take a closer look at what's happening in Greece now. There are wildfires across the mainland and several of the islands, including Corfu and Rhodes. Our Europe correspondent, Siobhan Robbins, is on Rhodes and sent this report.
Evacuate immediately to Rhodes. In Masari, they're clearing out. This is the final warning. It's time to leave. The flames are coming. They quickly try to protect what they can, to batten down the hatches, with no idea what will be left when they return. Can't you see the smoke? The fire is coming. It's coming to the village, says Yorgos. Within minutes, he will join the exodus. Of course, I'm afraid I have small children, explains Artie, already in his car. This is the third time his village has been evacuated in 3 days. This is the source of the danger, a wildfire threatening 2 villages. But some have stayed behind to fight. We cannot go. We will go straight to the fire because if we leave, everything will burn, McAllis says. Firefighters are now fighting these blazes on several fronts, and this wind that's whipping around is making it even more dangerous and difficult. Minutes later, the fire changes direction. We're told to get out as reinforcements prepare to go in. It's a repeating pattern. Along the coast, flames have also broken through defences. The same places blazes forced people from their hotels at the weekend.
It's been really traumatic. You could see the whole headland was alight, and it was scary.
With bags covered in soot and stinking of smoke, Claire and the kids have come to the airport to try to grab spots on the first repatriation flights back to the UK. They're not alone. Tired bodies cover the floor. Jack has been trying to leave since Saturday.
Shockingly, absolute shock. But still, regardless of whatever's happening, you should at least get some representative to speak to you and advise you. We've had no one. We've literally been just left on our own.
He's among hundreds of tourists who are looking for answers, many still sleeping in shelters, waiting to escape. Physically and economically, this disaster has already left its mark on Rhodes. Scars from a wildfire season, which is only just beginning. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Rhodes.
Well, evacuation flights carrying holidaymakers from Greece continue to arrive in the UK. British Airways is giving its customers the option to change their return flight from Rhodes and Corfu free of charge if they need to return earlier than planned. Anyone due to travel out of the UK in the next week to either island can change their flight to a later date if that's what they prefer. Jet2, meanwhile, has announced repatriation flights from Rhodes to Manchester, Leeds, Bradford and Birmingham departing tonight. They've cancelled all flights to Rhodes. That's until the 30th of July. Ryanair has said it is still flying customers in and out of the Greek islands. It says there is currently no need for repatriation flights. And TUI has cancelled all outbound flights to Rhodes until the 28th of July. Even so, there is still demand from passengers, as our business correspondent, Caprit Nawan, now reports.
Another thwarted summer, another headache for holidaymakers and the tourist industry. Wildfires on the Greek islands of Corfu and Rhodes have turned the heat on tour operators. They're being scrutinised over how they've handled the evacuations.
Tour operators have sent out planes empty to make sure that they can get those people back to the UK and even put on extra flights. They've done that as fast as possible. Having said that, obviously it wasn't not a very pleasant experience to say the least for people involved, and not a great end to their holiday.
Travel agents like Rebecca Kingston say some tour operators have communicated to their customers better than others. For those waiting to go away, it's an anxious prelude to what should be a relaxing summer holiday.
The great British summertime has let us down massively this year. People are more desperate for a holiday than ever. We're still seeing like the recovery from COVID. Some people, this is their first holiday in about 3 years. So they're really looking forward to it.
This is no doubt frustrating for holidaymakers, many of whom are still unsure about whether their holidays will go ahead. And it poses a logistical challenge for airlines, who are now having to arrange evacuations during the peak summer period. But beyond that, the industry is confident about its prospects. After the crippling effect of the lockdown, they should make a mere dent in a recovery that is well and truly underway. Airlines and agents say bookings are still strong. With little sunshine and cheer at home, people are still desperate to get away.
We'll be carrying, somewhere over 18 million passengers in July and August this year. Today alone, we've over 602,000 passengers and 3,200 flights. So no, there's no shortage of people who want to get away. I think after having been locked up for a few years.
Cancellations, evacuations, strikes and delays. It's become par for the course. But as long as it continues to rain in July here, the foreign holiday is alive and well. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Well, at 7:30, we'll be joined by a panel of experts to discuss what your rights are if your flights have been cancelled or you've been forced to cut your holiday short. But for now, let's speak to Tim Catley, who managed to flee Rhodes today on one of those evacuation flights. Tim, hello to you. Thank you so much for talking to us. So were you on a package holiday there?
Yes, we were. We were with TUI and flew out on the 19th of July.
OK, so what happened? When did you realise that actually there is a fire and this is going to be a problem?
That would have been the Saturday. We were staying at the Princess Lindos Beach in Lardos. We'd been out for the day. Down in Lindos itself, my daughter had an alert on her phone stating those certain areas had to evacuate. We phoned the hotel just to confirm if that was the case. We were told at the time that unfortunately, yes, there is a fire, but we're okay. We're a bit further away from it. Nothing to worry about. Everything's fine. So we stayed for another half an hour where we were, noticed where the wind was blowing and how the clouds of smoke were looking in the sky, realised probably time to get back. Thankfully, we did have a hire car at this time. Drove through the village, and that's when it kind of just the reality hit us more than anything. There were people walking down the roads with towels around their faces, groups waiting for buses. And as we meandered through the village, getting closer to our hotel, that's when we realised there was a mass exodus, basically a complete evacuation. We got to the hotel, there were hundreds of people outside. By the time we got there, I just dropped my family off, said, go to our room, pack anything you can. I will see if I can get further information and we'll take it from there.
OK, and where did you go to get that information? Because as you said, the only information up until that point was that text on your daughter's phone, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We tried to speak to the reception. They had no information. I wandered through the crowds of people, trying to see if anybody else could help, tried to see if there was a TUI rep on site. At that point, there was no one there. I spoke to about 3 families just to see if they had any information at all to say what's happening, why are we all here, what's going on. We were all in the same situation. Nobody knew. They were just told the alarms went off and we were told to come here. No one had any idea what was going on. So at that point, I ran back to help my family, get everything in my suitcase, pulled everything to the car, shoved it into the car, and I asked them to wait to see if I could find anything else. It was only by that point when coaches started arriving, I noticed there was a TUI representative. Spoke to her and then told her about the situation, that we had a hire car. What are we expected to do? What do you want from us? What's happening? Where do we go? And at that point, they said, all we can do at the moment is evacuate people. Because I have a car, they've just told me to drive north and await further information.
And so what did you do, Tim?
Pestered TUI as much as possible to figure out the next steps. I think we drove for about 30 minutes, had a bit of a rest stop to reassess what we needed to do, just made sure my children were fine. At this point, it was very traumatic for them. They were very distressed. We stopped to make sure that we could calm them, reassure them what we were doing was the right thing. We had everything under control and tried to be as resilient as possible, really. By that point, I was trying to contact anybody on the TUI app. My partner was contacting TUI through the phone. Again, no information coming through whatsoever. At that point, we noticed the smoke was billowing quite rapidly over the hills, and it seemed to be coming to more where we were at this point in time. By that point, the kids were hungry. They needed food. We needed to move, so we got back into the car and we carried on again north, just as far as we could. And just every time we stopped, we had to reassess what we had to do next.
It sounds absolutely terrifying. Have you ever experienced anything like that before?
Absolutely not. No, nothing like this at all. I think it was just we needed to do what was right at the time for my family and just see what we could do and what TUI could provide for us. Unfortunately, it was little at that point, and desperate measures we had to reach out to the local community to see if they could help provide accommodation or knew of anywhere we could stay.
So what happened? Where did you end up staying? And how did you end up getting home?
So this was late Saturday evening after we managed to get some food for my children. TUI did phone us and they said that the likelihood of getting any accommodation was slim. Have you tried booking.com or Airbnb? By that point, my response was yes, of course. We tried that first because we had no response from the airlines or the operators. We didn't know what was going on. So by that point, my desperate times, desperate measures, I looked at a few Facebook groups locally and just put a post out there to see if anybody could help and direct us in a location of any accommodation that we could go to at this point. Thankfully, the outpouring of support from the locals has been amazing, and one person did reach out to me. We spoke to her and she put us up for shelter for 2 nights whilst we tried to identify what we could do next. So my most important thing was get my children some shelter, get them to sleep while my partner and I figured out what we could do next.
And so how did you end up on the flight home?
So we looked at worst case scenario. Did we need accommodation for the next day? Can we find somewhere? What else can we do? Can we book a flight with another airline? When's the earliest that we could go? So while my partner was looking at accommodation, I was looking at flights. So I bought a flight with an alternative airline for this evening. That was the worst case scenario because we still hadn't heard anything from TUI. It was just by chance then late on Saturday night, it was Sunday morning. There was a response from TUI on the application to state, if you are not in shelter, if you are not at the airport, please phone this number. By that point, I'd already booked the flights, phoned the number, and speaking to the representative on the end of the phone, they were just trying to identify where passengers were and where guests were. They had no idea. So they were asking for me where I was, did I have transport, how soon could I move? Once they recorded that information, I got a phone call from TUI at 3:20 this morning stating there's a flight available at 6:05. Can you get yourself there? Of course, we're not going to say no. We packed everything as quickly as possible and we got us straight out of there, and I left the hire car and got my family into the airport.
Tim, what did it feel like when that flight took off?
Relief. As I said earlier, my children were extremely distressed, and even though TUI did actually say at the point, did you want to continue your holiday? There was no point. We only had a few days left. They just wanted to go home. I think they just wanted the comfort of home at this point. It made sense to do it. There was no point continuing. I think as soon as we got everybody through, checked in and on the plane, I could see the relief in everybody, and it was just nice to get home. I think we landed at 9:20 this morning.
Well, Tim, we are so glad that you're home safely, and thank you so much for talking to us this evening.
No problem.
Right, well, let's speak to Sky's Rachel Venables. She's at Stansted Airport, where some of those repatriation flights are landing this evening. Rachel, how many have arrived and how many more are we expecting?
Well, let me tell you, there have been such emotional scenes here at Stansted today. 2 flights inbound landing just after 4 o'clock this afternoon. Both of them were already scheduled, so they weren't extra flights that were put on, but still they were occupied by people who I think at points over this last horrendous weekend thought they might never get home. And let me tell you, the hall here at Stansted Airport by the arrivals gate was packed out with anxious people, families particularly, staring at those gates, willing the doors to open for that first glimpse of their loved ones coming through. They too, of course, have been watching the news here, hearing from their loved ones, at times maybe things going dark as they tried to work out what was happening and desperately pleading and praying that they would get home safely, as many people did here in Stansted today. And as you mentioned, we know that repatriation flights are continuing at other airports throughout the evening. Now, we've been speaking to a number of the holiday makers about the trauma that they've been through, and it's clear many of them feel they were very lucky to make it back home alive.
Basically, the hotel we stayed in, we was literally there a day. There was smoke coming over the top of the hotel, but we thought nothing of it because the hotel said nothing. We booked with Jet2, but they done nothing, basically. And the only reason we knew we had to leave was because the staff had gone, and we just see everyone running down the front of the beach. And we just went, right, it's time to go. It was like a massive bonfire. Like my mate's daughter, she literally turned around, she had her lips burnt, her shoes were melting. It was chaos. We've been literally running for about 2 days, just walking away from the fire.
Did you at one point think you'd make it home here?
No, didn't know. Like I said, Jet2 done nothing but with them. TUI actually helped us out. We ended up in a refugee centre because they picked us up in a coach from another hotel which was further south down the coast. And then they put us up on a boat for the night last night. And then our friends managed to book flights for today. Still heard nothing from Jet2, nothing.
Well, a statement from Jet2, a spokesperson said they understand how difficult this experience has been for many people, and they say their entire focus is on looking after their customers. They say they've got a significantly expanded presence in Rhodes, and they've also been putting on a number of repatriation flights, 4 scheduled for this evening, following one that landed at Leeds Bradford Airport yesterday. Jet2 also one of the companies that has decided to stop flying customers out to Rhodes. They've cancelled all of the holidays there for a number of days, as have TUI. They've also put on a number of repatriation flights. Interestingly, though, some other airlines have taken a different approach. So you've got the likes of EasyJet and British Airways. They are still flying the customers who want to out to Rhodes. So they say they're giving passengers who've booked the opportunity to rebook for free, to change their flights with no additional charge if they don't feel confident in going out and continuing on with their holiday plans. All the while, we look to see what advice there is for the government, and certainly for now, the Foreign Office hasn't told people not to travel, but to make sure they follow the advice of the Greek authorities once people are out in Rhodes.
OK, Rachel, thank you so much. This is Sky News. Still to come, as firefighters work to control blazes in Corfu, we'll hear from holidaymakers who were forced to flee.
I'm Hannah Thomas-Peter, and I'm Sky's climate change correspondent. The UK is a world leader in wind power. Power! Power! People! It's part of the Congo Basin rainforest, which is such an important ecosystem. It's known as the lungs of Africa. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. She doesn't really enjoy speaking to the press, and it wasn't clear right up until the last moment that she was going to sit down with me.
I might be just very naive, but I do believe that change is possible, otherwise we wouldn't be climate activists.
I'm confident for the last 30 years we have known how bad it is. I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to fight for the next step.
You can see just the piles and piles of stuff, these sofas and people's desks and children's books. And you can see inside this home here, people trying to sort out their home. It's just been devastating.
I think everything's at stake. The future of our planet, the future of the beauty around us, the future of you and me.
Now, Corfu has also seen people rescued from wildfires after evacuation orders were given for some parts of the island over the weekend. More than 2,000 people were moved to safety by land and sea. The Greek Coast Guard says individuals were evacuated from Nisaki Beach on the northwest coast, with 6 of their vessels involved in that operation. As one of the fires was breaking out on the island, the initial glow could be seen from across the water in Albania at sunset. Holidaymakers who've made it back to Britain described what they'd seen on the island.
We started getting messages from the authorities. Our village was mentioned, so I said, right, time to go. Wandered outside and realised the flames actually coming up sort of looked very close.
We were like up on a hill and the sky was just getting more and more orange, so we were like, right. And then because we got like 3 alerts saying evacuate, we were like, let's just.
You could definitely like taste it in the air, like it was like smoky, so it was palpable.
It was really strange. The sky was just like orange and then just fading to black. It was a bit scary.
We just saw kind of the fire spreading. It was quite scary.
I think we first saw it about 8 p.m. from our hotel balcony. We could see it on the mountain in Corfu. Within 15 minutes you could already see that it spread into quite a big area, and then after that you could just see the sort of circle of flame just sort of spreading slowly in each direction.
Right, time for a quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
It will stay unsettled into next month with further showers or longer spells of rain. There'll be a mostly fine evening, but there will be some fairly isolated showers around, mainly in the far southeast. Northwest Scotland will see more general showery rain moving in, and that will spread across much of northern Scotland tonight. But it will be mainly dry elsewhere, although the odd shower can't be ruled out. Clearer skies mean it's going to be cooler than it was last night, and tomorrow morning will bring a mix of sunshine and showers.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
This is Sky News Tonight. Coming up this evening, holidays for thousands of tourists have now been cast into doubt. We'll be finding out what your rights are with a panel of experts shortly. Well, as hundreds of people fly back to the UK from parts of Greece affected by the wildfires, other holidaymakers' plans are now in doubt. And if you're one of those, I'm joined now by a panel of experts to explore what you can do and what your rights are. Joining me, Jennifer Lynch, she's the General Manager at Arrange My Escape, and Chris Haslam, Chief Travel Writer at The Times and Sunday Times. Jennifer and Chris, thank you so much for talking to us this evening. Jennifer, let's start with you. I suppose it depends, A, what you want to do, and B, what sort of holiday you've booked.
Absolutely, yes. I think it's clear to say that if you have travel plans in the next 30 days, get in contact with your supplier. There may be options that you have. You might be able to move your booking, speak to your airline. If you've booked plans separately, there may be different things involved and different conditions. So it is important that you speak to your travel provider and ask for an estimate of when they will be in contact with you to discuss what can be done. I know we've been in contact with our passengers in the next 7 days, just to let them know that their holiday plans won't be going ahead, and looking at options to maybe move their departures, but also give customers, travelling in the next 2 weeks, the heads up that they may not be going as well.
Why, Jennifer, why won't they be going ahead? Is it because the carriers aren't flying, or the hotels have stopped or have cancelled the bookings? What's happened?
Yeah, well, the passengers in the next 7 days, we're seeing from tour operators like TUI and Jet2 cancelling the departures. I think their main priority at the moment is just getting the people home and repatriation flights and getting the people back to the UK without getting anyone out. Fires are uncontrollable, that we can't predict what's going to happen. So it's really important that we don't get any more passengers out and put them in this situation. Also, we don't know what extent the damage has done to hotels. So we can't really be putting passengers into this position.
Having said that, Chris, I want to bring you in now. There are still going to be people who want to go on holiday to these islands, aren't there?
There are. I've been told by all the tour operators there's been no real let-up in the demand for summer sun in the absence of there being any here. That said, in Rhodes particularly, 45 hotels in 7 resorts are now effectively off limits. The hotels themselves may not be damaged, but I spoke to people down in Lindos today, running hotels there, said their hotel was fine, but the utilities had gone. There's no electricity, no water. They couldn't say when that would be back on. So that's, if you take 45 hotels out of the entire bed stock of Rhodes, that reduces the amount of capacity that's available for people to go elsewhere on Rhodes. But that said, there is quite a lot of extra capacity across Europe this summer, partly because certain nations in Europe aren't travelling quite so much, and mainly because the Russians aren't travelling at all. So, last week I found a holiday with for £57 for a week from Birmingham Airport. So there's availability out there. If you want to change, the availability is there, the accommodation is there, the airlift is probably there. But what you've got to do is persuade the tour operator to show mercy, because at the moment, the official advice would be that because there's no government advice against non-essential travel, they can say, if you don't want to go, fine. But we call that disinclination to travel, and you can't have your money back.
And we'll come back to that notice from the government. But Jennifer, is that something that you're saying, that people are saying, OK, listen, OK, we can't go there, but is there somewhere else that we can go? And are you accommodating that?
Yeah, absolutely. The passengers that have had their holidays cancelled, we've managed to rebook them onto other islands. We are seeing availability, which is great. It's not normal at this time of year, so it is something that we are able to do. Passengers outside of the 7 days, I think their options are slightly different. They have to adhere to the rules and regulations of the tour operator currently. We'll wait for further updates throughout the week as to what the rules will be in the next few weeks.
OK, let's talk, Chris, about that notice from the government, because if it changes to you shouldn't travel there, it really changes everything, doesn't it? From your insurance to your flight, everything.
Changes. It's like a big switch that goes down. It's all the government has to advise against is non-essential travel to that destination. And effectively, that's similar to, remember during COVID, we had red listed nations that we couldn't go to. That's almost the same thing if the FCO issues that advice against non-essential travel. In that case, the package travel regulations say that those who have booked a package holiday, and it has to be a package holiday, that means you've booked flights and accommodation together and possibly car hire as well, or a combination, any combination of those three, that counts as a package. If you've booked that through a travel agent or a tour operator, you're protected under the package travel regulations. And it is the responsibility of the tour operator either to offer you an alternative or a refund if you can't get out there because of some disaster, or if you're out there and disaster strikes, it's their responsibility to get you back. Sadly, if you haven't booked through a tour operator or a travel agent, you've booked yourself a flight here, a hotel there, a car, rental car over there, you're on your own.
And if you have insurance and non-essential travel kicks in, that insurance is not valid, isn't it?
In most cases, most off-the-shelf insurance products, yeah, it wouldn't kick in. I mean, you can now buy insurance. You can buy insurance for travel insurance for Afghanistan if you want it now. It's sort of changed slightly since COVID. But in effect, for most package holiday people going to the Mediterranean, their insurance wouldn't cover them for that. And that is why the tour operators have to refund you.
Mm. OK, Jennifer, when people are looking at insurance, let's say they want to go ahead and they're looking at insurance, what sort of clauses should they be looking at to make sure that if they do have to leave at such short notice because of the fires, they will be covered?
Normally that would be curtailment cover. So, you know, if there is a natural disaster, they're covered. But if they're covered under the package travel regulations and they've booked a package, then they are the responsibility of the tour operator to get them out of there. But yeah, if you've booked separately flights and accommodation, you've done yourself, I would definitely be having a little look at the small print in your policy.
And just keep checking that travel advice, Chris. Wouldn't that be your advice?
Yeah, well, I think if the government were to change its stance on Greece or any other nation and issue advice against non-essential travel, you'd hear about it pretty quickly, because it would be, as I say, it's like putting the brake on the travel industry if that happens. So that will come to you. In terms of your insurance, if you haven't bought your insurance, it's so good to speak to somebody and actually ask them the question than to try and work it out by booking online. You do need to make sure that you've got, as Rebecca said, that you've got that curtailment cover, and also look to see that you've got cover for natural disasters.
Do you think this is going to affect travel to the Greek islands next year, in the future? People are looking at these scenes and thinking, perhaps not next year? Chris?
No, because we've got very short memories as tourists in the UK, and we flock back to people. We flock back to destinations. We forget very, very quickly. But that said, in the longer run, nations around the Mediterranean really need to start looking at the future of the summer in the Med. With these high temperatures, they are going to continue. There are going to be more events. They're going to be more frequent and more extreme as a consequence of climate change. It's going to effectively put some parts of the Med off limits in the summer. And what that's going to mean is that if they want to protect their tourism industry, they're going to have to work with us and with the Northern European nations who send people down there. We need to stop sending people out there in the summer. And that would mean you'd have to, you see, all these people who've been affected, their families who've gone off because the school holidays started last week. We need to change the school holiday system so people can go in the spring, in the autumn, and avoid these ridiculous midsummer temperatures.
Jennifer, I see you nodding. Is that something you agree with? And where would people go?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of destinations in the Mediterranean, so many that we send passengers to. I think this is just an awful scene that's happened. You know, we're seeing unrealistic temperatures. I know it's hot generally in the summer, but it is extremely hot in Europe at the minute. But I think with global warming, we are going to start to see these temperatures continue. So yeah, I think I'm in agreement. Maybe the school holidays do need to be spread out, so we're not seeing passengers, you know, these flights full and resorts full at this time of year.
And just a final thought from you both. Jennifer, we'll start with you. How do you think everyone has dealt with this? The tour operators, the hotels, the airlines. How have they dealt with this?
Yeah, I think it's a massive learning curve, if I'm totally honest. And also it's an unrealistic situation, isn't it? It's a disaster. It happened very quickly. You know, you've got to have a lot of people in place to deal with thousands of people. You know, we're talking tens, 20,000s worth of people. So to have that put on a tour operator in a short amount of space, it's really difficult. The logistics aren't there to deal with that. So I think moving forward, many tour operators will probably look at sort of their emergency scenarios and where they can improve.
Chris, what do you think? And do you think that people are going to be thinking, well, I wonder if where I'm going to stay has any sort of emergency plan?
Yeah, you should be thinking that, and they have all the major tour operators, TUI, Jet2, even the smaller tour operators, people like Sunville. They've all got what they call destination crisis management plans, DCMPs they call them, covering all possible outcomes, all possible disasters. So they've got the plans in place. But what we've seen today, what we've seen in years past, is that when they get the plan out, it doesn't work very well. We've had so many people saying they couldn't find any reps. Now, bear in mind, there's a staggering number of people on Rhodes. There's TUI have got 39,000 clients on the island, 7,800 of them down in the southeast, 300 members of staff working to evac those 7,800 British people down there. Clearly not enough people, not enough of a plan, not enough communication. And that makes people angry. But as I said, we're angry for a short term, and then come January, we're booking again.
OK, and on that, Chris and Jennifer, thank you so much for talking to us this evening. This is Sky News. Coming up, our climate change correspondent will look at what has caused these fires, and we will ask a climate scientist whether this is the new normal. Well, the fires which have forced so many people to leave their homes and hotels on Rhodes were fanned by building winds over recent days. The Greek Prime Minister has compared the situation to war and has said authorities must remain vigilant over the coming days. Our climate change and energy correspondent, Hannah Thomas-Peter, explains now what we can expect.
On Sunday, a satellite passed over the Earth, taking ultra-high resolution images of the planet. It's a picture from 330 miles away, and at first glance, it looks serene. But here in the corner, you can see Rhodes, which is anything but. The fires here are so big, this plume of smoke is visible from space. We can zoom in now and have a closer look at what's going on. This map from NASA shows us the fires burning at the moment. But to understand how it became so dire so quickly, we have to go back a few days. So this is the situation on Thursday. You can see a cluster of fires in the centre of the island here. And this shows what's happening with the wind on the same day. Crucially, wind gusts are relatively slow at 17 kilometres per hour or 11 miles per hour, and they're blowing the fires away from the coastal resorts here in the south. But on Friday, things start to change. The fires, you can see, haven't grown too much yet, but there is a really significant shift in the wind direction and the speed of the gusts, fanning the fires now down towards the south. When you look at Saturday, you can see exactly what's happened as a result. A huge increase in the size of that wildfire and even faster gusts of wind, making those blazes extremely difficult to bring under control. This satellite photograph from Sunday gives you a sense of just how large the burn area is. It has been an unusually bad period for Greece as a whole. As this chart indicates, the blue line shows the average weekly burn area over the last 17 years, normally peaking in mid-August. But this red line shows what's happening in 2023 with a well above average burn area much earlier in the summer season. The Mediterranean is especially vulnerable to wildfires because mild, wet winters allow vegetation to grow, and then hot, dry summers turn that vegetation into very effective fuel. And this isn't just a problem restricted to Greece. This is the European Commission's fire danger assessment for today and tomorrow, and you can see just how widespread the risk is. It will remain that way until the temperatures start to fall, and that isn't due to happen until later this week.
Well, joining me now from the Greek island of Lemnos is Sir David King, the former UK Chief Scientific Advisor and Chairman of the Climate Crisis Advisory Group. Sir David, thank you so much for talking to us. Do we know at the moment what has actually caused any of these fires?
Yes, I think we're in a fairly good position to answer that question. I mean, first of all, we have to say that this is not an extremely unusual event concerning just the last 10 years. What we've seen is these unusually extreme weather events happening around the entire world much more frequently than we've observed in the past. And in my view, there's no doubt that this is associated with what is happening in the Arctic Circle region. So the Arctic Circle has been losing ice that was covering the Arctic Sea around the North Pole very efficiently, reflecting sunlight back into space. That white snow reflecting sunlight efficiently back. And the problem is that during the 3 polar summer months, and we're in the middle of that now, the ice has melted to the point where the blue Arctic Sea is about 50%, about half of it exposed to sunlight. And what that means is that the Arctic Sea region is now warming up so rapidly that this is impacting on literally the whole of the Northern Hemisphere. What we're observing, and it is true that in Britain today, we're not seeing the extreme weather events we saw in 2021 or 2022. And the reason is because around the North Pole region is a wind that blows in an anti-clockwise direction. And this jet stream, the so-called jet stream, separates the cold air from the North Pole from the warm air from the tropical regions. Now that wind is now severely distorted. And fortunately this year, this summer in Britain, that distortion has led to a big shift in the cold air coming down into Britain from the North Pole region. Whereas in Europe as a whole, we're seeing just the reverse, that is leading to warm air coming up from the tropical areas, particularly from the Sahara Desert over Africa, that warm air coming right up into Europe and providing us with these extreme high temperatures and all these fires and the fire risks that you've been talking about here. This is a situation that we know can only get worse and worse as we go forward in time. Back in 2003, I had to report on the biggest climate change event in the world at that time, which was in Central Europe, when around 70,000 people died from heat stress. 2003, the average Central European summer temperature is now way in excess of what we experienced in 2003. And of course, we're getting used to dealing with these high temperatures, and it means that the number of people dying from heat stress is reduced. But nevertheless, the message is that year on year, this is now getting worse and worse, and we can only anticipate a higher and higher temperature increase on average going forward in time. We can't predict what the next year's weather will be because of this massive shift in the jet stream. We don't know where the cold air will be, where the warm air will be as we move forward into the coming years. But nevertheless, we have to see that these extreme weather events, which are occurring.
David, I'm going to have to interrupt. I'm so sorry. It's so interesting. You have to come in next time. We'll see you in the next hour for more on what is happening in Greece.